All right, Winning Plays podcast is back, and the Celtics and Warriors are tied up at 1-1, heading into a Game 3 showdown at the TD Garden. A lot to talk about from Game 2. So for this one, we had to bring back one of the true OGs, uh, mastermind of basketball at Sports Illustrated. Michael Pina is back on the show, joining me, Brian Robb, today to break down what was I'd say not a surprising game too, Mike, in terms of result, but certainly could be a lot of fallout here as the series moves forward. You're the guest here. Where do you want to go with this game first? We can go in any direction you want.
Um, First of all, it's wonderful to see you. Wonderful to talk to you. B-Rob, I think the story of the game was, and this is pretty much every time the Celtics lose, it seems like in these playoffs, story of the game is turnovers. Like in the first quarter, even in the first half, like the Celtics, I think were down 2 going into halftime, and Ime Udoka said after the game, like they were pretty upset at how they played in the first half, and they should have been. They should have been up double digits, at least 10, 12, 15 points at halftime, if they played with the composure on offense that they do when they win. And, we can get into the weeds of these specific turnovers and the themes that kind of spring from them, but a lot of them are just like bizarre. Like I'm thinking about one where Marcus tried to hit Jason Tatum on a back cut and just threw the ball into the paint, where Kevon Looney grabbed it, and it was like the third turnover in a row. And I think Steph Curry was fouled. They were in the bonus in transition, just like really sloppy basketball offensively by the Celtics. And I thought that was, not to discredit anything that the Warriors did. They made some really smart adjustments that we can get into, particularly putting Clay on to Al Horford, which was something that the Celtics couldn't really solve. But the turnovers to me were everything, honestly, in this basketball game.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I think, 19 overall in the night, 33 points off those turnovers that the Warriors scored, which I think has to be like a postseason high for a Celtics opponent, or certainly close to it. But yeah, it was straight up, even in the first half. I mean, the Celtics should have been up by a lot more in the first half, and they couldn't, because for all of Tatum's hot shooting and all of the Warriors struggling, like finishing around the basket in that first half, the Celtics would give the ball away on every fourth or fifth possession in pretty ugly fashion. So I think Smart was a main culprit there. Real rough game for him. I thought Tatum, for all his good shooting in the first half, had a lot of really bad passes when he
Is
did
it a
decide
hot
to.
is it a hot take to say that Tatum played better in game 1?
I was honestly thinking, like, that's a really good debate in terms of like the team game, in terms of what the Celtics needed. I'd agree with you there. If you factor in the defense, the scoring, the box score line says otherwise, but um, it was, despite the point total for Tatum, I didn't think he played a good first half.
Crazy sidestep threes, which are wonderful. When he hits those, usually the Celtics win. I thought his decision making and his ability to read the game, like no comparison to me personally. Game 1 to game 2, he was so much better in game 1.
Yeah, no question. So you look at how this game played out here with that. I mean, you brought up the adjustments here from the Warriors. So let's talk. We'll get into the kind of the theatrics a little later in the pod here, but in terms of, let's talk about the adjustments the Warriors made that the Celtics are going to have to look at in the series going forward. You mentioned Klay Thompson on Al Horford. Al Horford did not take a shot in the first half period. I think that was a pretty big development there. What else did you see in general in terms of how things switched up in the second matchup?
Yeah, so the big adjustment, just in terms of the matchups, was putting, from the Warriors' perspective, putting Draymond on Jaylen Brown and putting Klay Thompson on Al Horford. They switched a lot more to kind of take away the drive and kick game, and they blitzed quite a bit more. One of the key turnovers in the third quarter came after Jalen ran a dribble handoff with Rob Williams, and that's another thing that we can talk about. Rob Williams and the two big lineup and the Daniel Tice minutes. Yeah, we could have started the show with the Daniel Tice minutes, but that deserves its own episode. But in this particular play, it was a Jalen Brown, Rob Williams dribble handoff on the left side of the floor, and they blitzed it, forced Jalen, was in trouble, turnover. Steph Curry stole it. It resulted in a Klay Thompson 3 on the other end in transition because Al Horford is cross-matched with Klay Thompson. He's trying to chase him around the floor. And that was right after that, Warriors call time. Klay Thompson's hopping around, skipping around the court. And it's not like the game was over then. It was like a 7-point game early in the third quarter, 9 minutes to go, I think. But it was like, okay, these turnovers are they're killing the Celtics. And that matchup in particular, I think the next play down after the timeout, or maybe they didn't call a timeout, I can't remember. But Horford posted up Klay for the first time in the game, third quarter. Got absolutely nothing out of it. Bad miss at the rim. Draymond doubled. Both of them fell to the ground. And I think Curry hit a 3 in transition. So they got a 3 or a good look in transition the other way. And so just, I thought that those matchups were, they're conquerable. They're a lot more harder to beat when you get caught in the cross matches. And then also, I know that the lineup data maybe doesn't say this, but I just think like starting Derek White is something that the Celtics should think about doing in game 3. So maybe we can go from there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's go there right now. I think that's because that's a big part of this conversation now. When the Warriors made these adjustments in terms of defensively, the Celtics weren't able to punish them. And so now you look at next, okay, what is your next counter? And for Ime Udoka, there's a couple of things at hand here. We all see, I think even if Rob Williams we're at 100%, it might not be a great Rob Williams. Like it might not be a great double big series regardless in terms of what the Warriors play, but having Rob Williams at 70 or 80% has been a net negative when he's on the floor with another big in this series. And the numbers, I actually did the full breakdown here of like the double big numbers in this series right now. And I believe if you take out garbage time, Mike, the Celtics are a -38 with double bigs over about roughly 60 minutes of actions those guys have played together in this postseason. So I'm not saying the Celtics are definitely going to win the series if they go, don't beat around the bush and just start the game small. But I'm saying like the amount of time that Ime Udoka stuck with the double big lineup in game 2 surprised me a lot. And I think that needs to change going forward. Whether you want to go as far as the starting lineup shift, that's, we can debate that right now, but it's certainly a situation where the vast majority of the minutes, I think, should be with a single big on the floor for the Celtics.
I don't know what he's going to take away, Ime, from watching the film. I doubt that he will make a change that dramatic. I think that they have faith in Rob Williams coming off 2 days of rest in between these games to give them good minutes. And honestly, the starting 5 in the first quarter was great. Like once they started turning the ball over is where things kind of snowballed. They were dominant defensively in the first stint of the game, the first stretch where they got up. I think they got up 9.
Yeah, they were up 9. Yep, midway through the quarter.
Yeah, and honestly, like the problem is to me more offensively with Rob than it is defensively. I think defensively, he's been, when they put him on Wiggins and they let him roam off Wiggins, he's altered, blocked a lot of shots on the inside. He's made Steph Curry's life miserable. They started to bring Wiggins into the action and the ball screens with Curry, and Rob on the perimeter guarding those has been, hit or miss. There was one play where Steph split the screen, got downhill, finished with a layup early in the third quarter. And that's the play where you're just like, okay, Rob Williams is looking like a statue. It looks like he has cement shoes on. But I think overall defensively, I'm not that concerned. Offensively, when you look at the spacing is where it's like, when they put Clay on Horford and Horford's not really doing anything. And then it's just Jalen pushing in transition, trying to make something happen, Tatum isolating. The floor is really shrunk there, and there's not a lot of driving lanes. And also, I think one of the stats, I'm writing a big story about, I guess just like scoring at the rim in the playoffs generally. And this series is kind of really interesting with regards to that, because guess how many baskets the Celtics had at the rim in non-garbage time in this game, in game 2?
In game 2? 3
shots made. They had 3 attempts, 1 make at the rim.
Oh my God,
it's incredible.
That's nuts.
You watch the film and it's like there are several plays where they really, a lot of them are on the turnovers, where they really forced the issue trying to get downhill, and there were wide open 3-point shooters, because that's how the Golden State Warriors have always defended, especially when they're small. So yeah, I think that the spacing on offense is an issue when they're big, and that's something they might want to take a look at. But like scoring at the rim, not turning the ball over, I think these are the 2 key things that Ime will be trying to fix going forward. I don't know if you can fix turnovers besides just like guys like, I have a question for you actually. Do you think this team needs to like play slower when they force misses? Like,
yeah, I think they were on turbo in a lot of that game, like, and that fed into especially in the third quarter, that just fed into the beast, I feel like.
Yeah, and the Warriors are their team chaos, right? Like They love playing in transition. They love attacking you in the open floor off makes, off misses, especially off turnovers. And I just feel like in the half court on offense, I know their half court offense was really bad in game 2. It was really good in game 1. And I feel like, they're playing Bielitsa. They're playing
those
Jordan
lineups.
Poole, Curry. Like, their inability to just slow the game down, execute, take advantage of mismatches, and like really show that they're the better team, because in my opinion, they are the better team, is a little disappointing. So I wonder if they're going to try to slow things down a little bit, because they were running, especially off misses, and the looks that they got in transition were, you could say like, it was a sloppy game. We're going to put it behind us. That Daniel Tice pass in his first stint where Tatum hit him in the middle. It's like, that's a pass Tice can make for sure. He's made that his whole career. He's on the move. It's a tough one, but he can make that pass. He just messed it up. So I don't know where I've land on that, but I think like slowing down and just, trying to grind out wins from this point forward could be a okay strategy.
It is, and it's something I think when you look at what went well for them in the fourth quarter of game 2, game 1, I should say, it was, they obviously got out in transition and got easy looks there, but they just executed really well in the half court in terms of staying patient, making the extra pass, like letting the Warriors, run by them and get thrown around in their rotations to the point where they are finding wide open looks. The patience just wasn't there this time around. And whether that stemmed from the fact that the Warriors were a lot more physical in the half court and obviously wasn't being whistled for a lot of that stuff. So that just made life a lot harder for them. And we'll see, whether that's a 1-game thing or not, we're going to find out. I'll be very curious to see how like game 3 is called. But I think that certainly maybe played into it from a standpoint. The Celtics like, okay, well, they're literally mugging us in the half court. So like, let's get out more and try to run and beat this. And that obviously, haunted them because they were just as bad in that situation, if not worse.
Yeah, but when you run and you're not getting to the rim, that's like one of the whole points of attacking in transition. If you're not getting those easy layups and those bunnies, like, you can get an open 3 on this team anytime you want in the half court, really. And I know that they up the physicality, but I don't know, like,
this was like early season offense, Mike. I feel like this is a team there'd be many a night where they would just be terrible from inside the arc and no one could do anything in the paint, whether that was because, like you said, just because they weren't getting there in the first place or they were making poor decisions to get there. So it was a flashback from that standpoint, whether it's and I mean, Ime is going to have a lot of film to show on that in terms of like, okay, guys, like this is, you're doing this against the Bielitsas and the Pools of the world. It's not like what are you guys doing here? Like there are opportunities for better looks, and whether they can stay patient for him, I guess is the bigger question going forward, or if they get drawn into the chaos that the Warriors want.
Yeah, I think the other thing I'm thinking about with this series is how the Celtics have had so much success, or like moderate relative success, defending superstars throughout this entire playoff run. And I guess my question to you is just, what do you think of the job in terms of their execution and the strategy guarding Steph? Because I mean, we'll throw out the first 6 minutes of the first quarter of game one or whatever.
Not great.
Which was just like, there was no execution.
No.
And there was no scheme. But since then, I expected, honestly, a lot more switching on him and help behind the play. And that hasn't really been the case. And I understand why. And they've had, sometimes they've had six. He's just such a great player. But what did you think of just how they've tried to guard him and take him out of, or make him as uncomfortable as possible?
Yeah, I'm with you on the switching. I thought there would be more of that. Once they got their, feet wet in this series after the disastrous first quarter. It's been whether, like, I know you got an Ime Udoka talked about this after game 2 in terms of wanting to kind of mix it up. And so Curry didn't know what they were going to do. And that sense of unpredictability, which I think is a good tactic. But by and large, I think there were a few spots in this game where they almost like it'd go too far one way or the other. Like they'd give them too much space in a drop when they'd go to that. And then there are other times where Curry tried to weave inside the paint a little bit, and then it ended up being like there were 3 or 4 guys on him and a wide open Looney under the basket. And that was like, that type of easy offense is exactly what you can't be giving up in that situation. Like, you make it life hard for Curry, but don't do it to the point where you're giving layups to the other team or giving up wide open threes to the other team. And I think the Celtics, whether it was just 2, they didn't want Curry to go off again like he did in game 1 or whatever. They kind of, I think, got pulled into that a bit too much. And there was one spot where they had like 3 or 4 guys on him in the paint, and a wide open Looney at the basket. And I feel like that has to be cleaned up for moving forward in the series.
Yeah. So that play, and I don't want to step on something that I might write before game 3, but there were 2 or 3, and maybe there were more possessions that I haven't seen yet. But rewatching the game this morning, there were 2 or 3 plays where Horford started. They were all baseline or sideline out of bounds plays. And I don't think the Celtics were in a zone.
Yeah.
Horford started out on Curry. And that play that you're talking about, Horford starts out on Curry. It's like they're anticipating a switch or something.
Yeah.
And they just inbound the ball to Curry. Horford's on him. And it's just like, what are we doing? Like, that happened 3 times. And
so is that overthinking it in your mind? Like, is that like the Celtics being like a little too cute and the Warriors?
I'm like, is that a mistake? Why is that? What is even happening? I
assume that's the pre-switch. They're anticipating the pick and roll, but the Warriors can be like, okay, we're not going to do that. We're just going to go.
Yeah, but that matchup is not like, right. Horford's really good against a lot of players we've seen throughout this run. I don't think Horford on Curry is like a great matchup, and I don't think Udoka thinks so either. Like, they don't really switch Horford. They drop him pretty much every time they run a Steph pick and roll. So I just thought that was weird. And Steph will attack that matchup every single time. They switched a lot with Grant. He hit one step back over Grant. Grant forced him to drive every other time that he was brought into the switch, which was great. I think you need to force Curry into the arc. I think that's the strategy there with him at this point in his career, for sure, as good as he is finishing. But yeah, I just thought that was that Looney play in particular. And then a lot of people are screenshotting it where there's 4 defenders like all surrounding Curry, and then Looney gets the dump off, bounce pass for the layup. That started with Horford on him, and it's just I thought, and that wasn't the only time. So I don't know if that's a mistake or what, but it's something to just think about going forward.
Yeah, maybe the team just trying to get too cute with the over adjustments, and then the cavalry coming in too hard. Obviously, being like, oh crap, Horford's on Curry right now. We need to send help, and then it's like, oh, when you send everyone sending help, like that's when you get up easy looks. All right, so we have about 10 minutes left here. I'll start here with you. Give me your thoughts on the Draymond situation. Both I mean, the in-game stuff is self-explanatory. We don't really need to go into that. Obviously, they weren't going to give him the second tech for that situation and a double tech one, but his comments after the game and how this is going to like play forward in this series now, if at all, or it's going to be something we forget about, in another after game 3.
Can you refresh our listeners' memories about maybe what he said that you're referring to that was
He essentially said, I'll pull up the exact quote. He essentially says, like, I'm entitled to preferential treatment. Like, I've earned that. He told this to ESPN after the game in an interview, in terms of, when they asked him about the getting thrown out of the game, that sequence with Jaylen Brown where his feet were over Jalen's head, and in any regular season game would have been a technical foul, but he says he's earned deferential treatment from the refs. And so
I don't know about all that. I mean, there was one play where they were switching everything, and I think Jalen got him, or maybe it was Derek White got him on a switch after they switched like 3 ball screens in a row. Maybe it was Tatum. I can't remember. And Draymond poked the ball away, and it went out of bounds, and Draymond thought it was off whoever he poked it off of their leg. And he like punched his fist right at the ref to like be demonstrative. And it was like that right there in the regular season. I'm not saying he should have gotten a tech for that at all. But I'm just saying, like, most players, if Derek White responded that way in this game, he would have gotten a technical foul based on how he behaves normally. And I thought that generally the game was, I don't really like to get wrapped up in officiating. I thought the game was like really choppy because of the officiating both ways. And
I thought they calling the Celtics incredibly tight given what the Warriors were doing with, like, and I'm not trying to sound like a homer here, but I thought that from that standpoint was pretty one-sided in the first half. At least the second half was like the Celtics just fell apart, and I mean, it didn't impact the game as a whole, obviously.
Right. Yeah, there's 2 calls that were kind of like, what is happening? One was after well, there's like a bunch.
There's a bunch of them. Let's be honest here.
Yeah, there's one where Draymond and Tatum were kind of going at it a little bit, and the refs came over to talk to them, tell them to calm it down. The baseline inbounds pass comes over the top. Tatum's like, I don't even know. He's like barely touching him. They called a foul. Tony Brothers called a foul like before the ball was, like, the ball just got left the inbounder's hands, and he's calling a foul on it. That was odd. Draymond had a keeper where he attacked Derek White on a switch. Derek White's backpedaling with his arms up, like shoulder to chest.
Nothing.
A total non-call. Draymond misses. They do the thing where wait for the ball to miss before you blow the whistle.
And the Gary Payton.
That was really, yeah. Oh, that was just, that was a non. I mean, yeah, that was a big call too, because it forced Jalen to the bench. And yeah, I mean, there's a couple others with Draymond. There was the play where Draymond like tackled Grant Williams, and Grant Williams was fouled for it, or drew a foul, or was called for the foul.
Right.
And I think that was the play where Draymond got the tee too, which was like just bizarre. I'm not even sure what happened with that. Watching it on television, they didn't really explain why Draymond got that technical. But
yeah, ABC, by the way, you got to show that stuff. Like, I don't understand why, like, oh yeah, he just got technical. Like, why don't you show us what happened? Like,
yeah,
if you're watching on the brother ass.
That was bizarre. So I think like the Ime tech, I have never, maybe you can refresh my memory. I can't remember any time a coach has admitted to purposefully getting a technical foul because he was fed up with the officiating, and he was I think he used the word purposeful.
Yeah.
And I was like, I like just the legendary. I love Ime
Ime is
Udoka's
great.
honesty. Yeah. I can't remember a head coach ever saying that, and it was clear like he was upset the whole game with how they were calling it. And it was a distinct departure from, if you watched closely or not, if you just watched the Buck series, the Heat series, like how Bam Adebayo would set screens in that series.
My
It's
God.
like, yeah,
KG-esque.
like, oh my God, like it was they weren't calling anything, and that's playoff basketball. That's why it's awesome. And so the officiating was a little tight, I would say. In
But
game
just
two.
towards the salt, like it was a situation. Like you said, I hope they call, like they let it go like the other two series, but they have to do it both ways, and that wasn't the case, and that's why Ime and everyone was pissed off. It didn't matter in this game. Like if they call it the right way, the Celtics lose by 10 as opposed to 20 probably when all is said and done. But that's certainly in this series now. Like, it's going to be obviously closely watched on both sides given the fallout from Draymond's situation here. All right, let's wrap up here. We already hit on some adjustments for game 3. From my standpoint, I mean, we'll do a quick Tice 30-second. Tice shouldn't be playing. Like I'm the probably the last Tice defender in Boston, and then I'm even giving in to that standpoint that right now. But beyond that,
did anyone why I know that's not the most I read the transcript of Ime's presser at like 4 a.m. because I'm a weirdo, and I don't recall anyone asking about Tice.
No.
Did anyone ask about the Tice minutes?
Tice did not make the cut. We'll see. We'll get that on the radar for the practice day between 2 and 3. It is for game 1. I could kind of get it because it was like, okay, you're coming up with a 7-game series. We'll see what Tice can give you in the first half here for 6 minutes stint. And he was whatever.
When he came in the second half, I was like, what is even happening?
Right. But now, but in a game 2 there where everyone's rested and you've seen that like going smaller is probably your best bet with one big on the floor. Playing like Tice Grant together is just no bueno. It's just not going to work certainly not going to work offensively, and not going to give you enough defensively either. And so to
Looney
me now,
wasn't even on the court
right
for the first, when Tice first checked into the game. I was like, what's going on here?
So I would think that he goes bye-bye. The question now is like, what do you do? I assume Rob and Al maybe get one more chance together starting in game 3 before a potential shift is made. But from my standpoint, and I'm curious, like, I don't want to see them together more than the first 5 minutes of each half. And then I'd honestly, the rest of the way, I would think about trying to alternate Rob, Al, and Grant at center, and maybe play Al and Grant together a little bit. But that's it. Like, I want to see Derek White playing 40 minutes, and I want to stay small and switchable as much as possible against this Warriors defense. And honestly, for the spacing offensively that you need to have to stretch out this Warriors defense.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about just how if starting Grant instead of Rob is a better move than starting Derek.
Right. It helps your rotation more for sure in terms of keeping it in order.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do think that Derek White needs to average over 30 minutes a game in this series going forward. He's like my favorite player on the team. I think he's just so critical to so much on both ends, particularly in this matchup. Rob, like if he doesn't start, like what do his minutes even look like, do you think? Because I don't know. I'm just thinking about like matching up with the other, with like you don't really want him on the court when Draymond's at the 5 necessarily. So
no. And if they're gonna play Bielitsa too, like you don't want him to necessarily match up there.
I don't know if that's gonna happen again. That was frankly like weird. I know Iguodala wasn't available, but like, so what? Iguodala wasn't available at all in the last series. So I just don't know what how you kind of fit Robb into the series if he's not next to Horford, just like where he plays and when he plays. I don't think that they will make a significant adjustment before game 3. They could. I don't think they will. And yeah, I just more small ball, more Derek White. I think this is the first time the Warriors have ever played an opponent where their small lineup is better than the Warriors' small lineup,
Right.
which is very interesting. It doesn't mean that they will outplay them for the rest of the series, but I think on paper they've proven to be better and more capable. So Ime just hasn't really gone to the Boston's version of the death lineup. Horford, Jalen, Smart, Tatum, White. He doesn't really go to that lineup unless it's the end of the first half or the end of the game, usually. I wonder if he'll go to it a little earlier. Maybe in the third quarter would be a time to hit that button.
The Pritchard might be involved in that death lineup too, depending on the night.
Sure. No, sure. We haven't mentioned Pritchard. I think he's like really fine in this series and should definitely play more minutes than Daniel Tice.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, all in all, if you're the Celtics, you're pretty happy that you got the split here. Game 2, I feel like, I don't want to be disrespectful to the Warriors, felt very, and I know they said this before the game, come to Jesus moment. They were desperate to win that game.
It was a series.
Yeah, it was very, very important. And the way that like Draymond came out 10 out of 10 on the desperation meter, is how I would put it, in a game 2 of a series was, I don't want to say like last gasp at all. I think the Warriors are good. Of course, they're in the finals, but I just think the Celtics are better. And if they don't have needless turnovers, they will prove it in every game of the series. So that's like my honest takeaway after the first 2 games.
No, it's the Celtics. As long as they don't beat themselves in the series, they should win the series. I think we're both in agreement on that. But whether, they obviously came close to doing that in a couple rounds before this, and now that will be at the forefront again. So, all right, Michael Pina, make sure you check out his stuff all series long at Sports Illustrated. He'll be covering the series in Boston these next couple of games. Make sure you check him out on Open Floor as well, which is on one of SI's podcasts twice a week there. Mike, always great to catch up with you, buddy. We'll be talking to you again, hopefully later this series, and look forward to hanging out in Boston.
Absolutely. Can't wait to see you.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys, for listening. Rate, review, subscribe. We'll get back with you guys later this week as we get you ready for game 3.